the Sky News Centre. This is Paul Murray Live.
G'day, good evening. Welcome to the best city in Australia, Brisbane, in the most wonderful state that is Queensland. How good is Queensland? How good is Brisbane? And how good is Chris Kenny? We might find a way to talk about the climate emergency declared in Sydney. You can see Chris again tomorrow in the middle of the day. And an early shout out in the hour before us tomorrow night is the first of our Bad Blood, New Blood series, where we have a look at all the good reasons why they had to get rid of the ghost. And they replaced with the bloke who actually could win in a place called Queensland, Scott Morrison. A great insight put together by David Spears and our Canberra team, working on it weeks and weeks and weeks before the election and the many weeks since, which is only about a month. But still, there's plenty that'll be there tomorrow night and lots of news that you'll get the first bite at with Gleeso a little bit later tonight and then, of course, by this time tomorrow night. So make sure you're watching all night long tomorrow night here on Sky News, and make sure you're watching for the next 2 hours here as we are live from Brisbane. Been spending time with the family, and I can tell you what a magnificent state. Everything from the museums where we looked at stuff that literally had been to the moon, been to farms west of Ipswich, and g'day to my mates Robin and Drew and their beautiful little girl Willow. Been up to the Sunshine Coast, and a big shout out to my father-in-law Tim and his partner Nalda. We've been all over southeast Queensland as much as you can in any couple of days. One day we'll move here, darling. Come on, it's good. Weather's nice. All right, let's get to some of the stuff. Before we get to a crackerjack panel this evening, how's this for amazing? We've got Pauline Hanson, Corey Bernardi, Graham Richardson, Rowan Dean. Four of the best, all in one place, all here for the full hour. So no excuses, no toilet breaks. You're here for the whole first hour. Let's get straight into it tonight. Now, like most people, I'm a little bored of talking about Israel Folau. But we have to mention this at the start of the show because what is happening to Israel Folau is a perfect example of how the new puritanical left works. Not only do they disagree with you, but they have to make you so radioactive that not only do you lose your job, but no one will associate with you. They'll delete your number from their phone if they have it. No one is allowed to be your friend. No one is allowed to agree with you publicly. And as you know, in the past 24 hours, his attempt to raise money, sure, money he probably should have got from selling properties or finding a lawyer who might be able to pay for his legal defence, well, his attempt to put that up, of course, was taken down. Not because it was doing anything illegal, not because it was repeating homophobic rants, but simply because Twitter demanded that it goes. The same mob that thought that they were about to run Australia at the election a month ago are carrying on as if they were still in charge. I'm sad to say there are companies who fold, be it rugby union or be it the website GoFundMe. Now, GoFundMe is a great site because essentially whatever your cause, you can put it up and people decide to donate. Now, there are a lot better causes than Israel Folau's legal fund. And for those that are half listening, I do not defend what he has to say. I do not defend what he had to say when it came to the types of people who go to hell. But then again, I don't believe in heaven and hell. I don't believe in a God. Forgive me if that offends some people, but you know that's my view. And I do find it quite maddening that the woke left, who have nothing but contempt for religion, are somehow offended by a bloke who says you're going to go to a place that you don't think exists. As he tried to raise that funds, as you know, the tidal wave of carrying on over the weekend, including some distasteful stuff when people were comparing his cause to better causes, and clearly better causes on the platform, including sick kids. Well, the entertainment reporter Peter Ford tweeted over the weekend that he had been in contact with the parents of some of those kids who were being used simply as a political prop to say they were more worthy than Israel Folau. They said they were disgusted at the use of their image, of the image of their sick kid. But these people don't care. They couldn't care about those kids, and they certainly couldn't care about the principle that sits behind Israel Folau's ability to fight for what he believes in. A court will decide whether or not rugby union had the right to sack him. But the idea that you're not allowed to raise funds, you're not allowed to mount a defence, is the new woke Puritans. This is what GoFundMe wrote today. As a company, we are absolutely committed to the fight for equality and LGBTQ plus alphabet people and fostering an environment of inclusivity, except, of course, if you're a fundamentalist Christian. Then you can go jump. Fundamentalist Islam, that's fine. While we welcome GoFundMe engaging in diverse civil debate, again, not on the behalf of Christians, not on the behalf of fundamentalist Christians, we do not tolerate the promotion or discrimination of or inclusion. Well, what was the promotion? This is his legal fight to see if he had the legal right to say what he thought. about a place that most people angry at Israel Folau don't believe exists. This is all about, and I repeat, the way the new left works. Not only do you have to lose your job, but you have to lose all support. You have to be cast out of the castle. You have to be sent to Siberia. Not because you did anything wrong, but because you said something wrong. That's dangerous stuff. But as the election showed, and as you know and as I know, Australians are smarter than that. And the more these people try to dance on the metaphorical grave that is Israel Folau's football career, he will eventually garner support. Probably not majority support in Australia, but here's the point. If you can't divide what the individual said and the principle about whether or not the individual had the right to say it, then you, my friend, are part of the problem. And we're probably not friends. Let's turn to the people who actually won the election, because, of course, it is surprising how the media spends so much time telling us what Labor will and won't vote for, where the shadow cabinet had a meeting today to decide whether they will or won't pass tax cuts. They said they might. The Prime Minister was in Perth today after seeing the Blues win in State of Origin. I shouldn't say that too loudly. They're very touchy about that here in Queensland for obvious reasons. Here's what the Prime Minister had to say when it came to Labor's carrying on about tax cuts, because if there was one thing that was absolutely clear, Australians want to pay less tax, not more. That was the message that won in Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania, South Australia, Western Australia as well. Sadly, the Northern Territory, not quite.
Well, look, I think they'll continue to make excuses. They'll continue to tear themselves apart over this. And all they're saying to the Australian people is that they haven't listened to the 1 in a 100-year message that they've just sent them. They don't get the aspiration side of what the package is about. They don't get the fact that making a change to reduce the 32.5 cent tax rate down to 30, you know, for people earning between 45,000 and 200,000 is a significant change. But fiscally, it has to be absorbed over time.
Common sense stuff. It's what Australians voted for. It's why Labor only has one senator here in the state of Queensland. But he's got plenty more, including an interesting take, which is it's time to push back against over-the-top unions. Have a look.
Any change in this area must be evidence-based, protect the rights and entitlements of workers and have clear gains for the economy and for working Australians. It's a practical, economic process, and we look forward to working with people to that end. We would expect business organisations such as yours, and I'd be not surprised when you do, to build the evidence base for any potential changes and to bring along the full community with all of us.
He also said that it's time to cut red tape and cut green tape, where unnecessary environmental regulations are holding business back, holding development back, holding jobs back. So time to cut taxes, time to make sensible changes so unions can't clog up the system, and how the Green movement is not able to protest and make sure that they can kill things off. Well, how's that described by The Guardian, when, of course, they're not writing conspiracy theories about yours truly, this station, or begging for donations? Well, here's what they wrote. This is what they took out of that speech today. Morrison flags Trump-style economic plan in pledge to cut more red tape. Of all the things you can have a go at Donald Trump about, tax cuts and red tape and regulation reductions that have led to the lowest unemployment rate in 49 years, yeah, you keep going on with that, guys. Winning. Speaking of the Labor Party, their shadow treasurer still doesn't get it. This is what he had to say today, well, after telling everyone that he's done a lot of travel, he's been around Queensland, he's driven the equivalent of here to Cairns and back. Oh, he understands Queensland now.
Your leader, Anthony Albanese, on Friday said he didn't reckon somebody earning $200,000 was in the top end of town. Do you agree with him?
Yeah, I agree with the 2 points that Anthony has been making about this. First of all, we accept that some of the language that we used in the last term, and I used in the last term, didn't strike the right chord in the Australian community. We do acknowledge that. And the second point that Anthony is making there is that if you're on a good wicket in this country, we say good on you. That is a good thing.
he went on to say, as part of the things that he has learnt after a month of losing, well, he went on to say that his party's tax policies and, quote, some of the language that he used at the top end of town contributed to a thumping result in his home state of Queensland, this beautiful place. Dr Chalmers said the complexity of Labor's tax proposals, which he helped sell as Bill Shorten Shadow Finance Minister, and the, quote, mixed messages on coal led to only 1 in 4 Queenslanders voting Labor. Dr Chalmers is now the opposition's highest ranked Queenslander and recently took a 4-day 2,800-kilometre trip through the state to find out why his party was rejected at the ballot box. Wow, 4 days. What a shame, of course, he didn't realise that when they were putting the policies together, he should have realised they were doing the wrong thing. He could have mentioned this when he was the Shadow Parliamentary Secretary to the Leader of the Opposition. What about the Shadow Parliamentary Secretary for Trade and Investment? The Shadow Assistant Minister for Trade and Investment, that's when he's moving up the ranks. Then when he was the Shadow Minister for Financial Services and Superannuation, the Shadow Minister for Productivity, the Shadow Minister for Sport, the Shadow Minister for Resources. Yes, seriously, he was the guy who was on the side of the maybe, maybe not about Adani. What about as the Shadow Minister for Finance, when he was by Chris Bowen's side coming up with the tax policies that destroyed the Labor Party? And now, of course, he's Shadow Treasurer. And he's been from Brisbane to Canton back in 4 days. Well done. Quickly to Western Australia, there is a dirty deal that is being done there. Where, how's this? If you're a public servant, you're about to get an extra public holiday. Just for public servants, just for bureaucrats. They wanted a pay rise, but this seems to be the trade-off deal that the McGowan government is putting in place. It is an absolute rolled gold rort. The idea in 2019 that we are having special public holidays for public servants is bad old days stuff. And finally, relax, climate change, it's being dealt with by the Lord Mayor of Sydney. She put out a mayoral minute yesterday and the entire council agreed with her that there's a climate emergency and a local council is the one who's going to fix it. Let's turn to Twitter. The City of Sydney has officially declared a climate emergency. She goes on to write, successive federal governments have shamefully presided over a climate disaster and now we are at a critical juncture. By declaring a climate emergency, we can call on the federal government to respond urgently by reintroducing a price on carbon to meet the Paris Agreement emission reduction targets. Well, thank God Clover Moore's doing her bit for the environment. Thank God she is not introducing a light rail train service right up the main drag of Sydney that last time I checked isn't solar powered. Well done, Clover. Just loosen the choker a little bit. Got to let more blood move around. Let's get into the conversation now with a great panel around the country at the Sky News Centre, the host of the Outsiders program, none other than the great Rowan Dean. How are you?
Hi, Paul. I'm really good now. We've got a new thing, Paul, called the Clover Moore effect. Tonight she announced her global warming emergency. It's one of the coldest nights in Sydney that I can ever remember. It's like the Siberia you were just mentioning. The Clover Moore effect working as always, almost as good as the Al Gore effect.
The great Graham Richardson, who sadly we don't get to see on Richo this week, but we all get to sit back and watch the Liberal Party tear itself apart before they thought they'd lose and after they know that they've won. How are you, great man?
Mate, I'm very well. I'm anxious to get stuck into you over your introduction, but that can wait.
That's natural. That's the way it should be.
Indeed.
Now, Corey Bernardi, well, of course, remains a senator for South Australia, remains the leader of the Australian Conservatives, but, well, he is the party from now on. We might have a chat about that a little bit later. How are you, Senator?
I'm pretty good, Paul. I had a big week, and the Australian Conservatives will exist for another 4 days, I think.
Oh, well, get your T-shirts now. Get your T-shirts now. Let's see how the merch can move. And Pauline Hanson is joining us from the most northern tippy-top part of Queensland. She is right at the top. She can literally, like Sarah Palin could see Russia from her house, she can see Papua New Guinea from her swag. Where exactly are you, Pauline?
Bamaka, the northernmost part of the country, and Queensland. So I went to the tip, which is the very top of Australia today. So it's fantastic. So I'm up here. I've done the road trip from home up here, and it took me just over 3,000 kilometres to actually drive up here, about 3,200 kilometres from Brisbane driving up here. So it's been very interesting. fantastic, and I encourage all Australians, put it on your bucket list. Come here and visit Queensland and the tip. Yeah.
We're just having a look at some of the stuff here, and we should declare this is shot by your people, but that still does mean it does work as a camera, but I apparently have to declare this or Channel 2 goes mad. What's it like to stand at that most northern part? I've never had the honour.
Absolutely fantastic. The waters are unbelievable, the colours that you have there. Huge big beaches. I was surprised how much of beaches there. White sand, absolutely beautiful. It's amazing to actually stand at the tip and you can actually see the east coast and also the west coast, and you see the sun setting at night. The colours are absolutely beautiful. The fishing's great, so come up here for the fishing as well. But it's just a trek that you need to do. It's not sealed roads all the way, but to come to the community, beautiful people, it's a great part of Australia. So, you know, instead of going over, why leave Australia? Why go over to Bali when we have all this in Australia on our doorstep and we don't come here?
I agree completely. All right, we're going to get on with it because Richo wants to yell at me in a second. But before we get there, just quickly, can we just touch on the Israel Folau thing? Because, look, let's be clear. This has been talked out too much. But every day we think it's time to move on, something happens. And let's get to you on this, Corey, because, again, I don't support what he wrote. I do find it funny that most of the people who hate what he wrote don't believe in heaven or hell, so therefore how can you be offended at being sent to a place that you don't think exists? But then there's the overall principle here. He has a right to challenge whether or not he should have lost his job. He has a right to, if he wants to, ask people to donate to that. Now, I don't think that's a smart thing to do, but he's got a right to do it. But what about my central point at the start here, about the way the new left works? It's not just that you lose your job, but you must become so radioactive that people will delete your name from their phones.
Paul, you're right on all of these counts, and it occurred to me today, I was talking about this with my wife, and the list of other sinners on Israel Folau's tweet, none of them are out there complaining and saying, you know, boycott him and shut him down. It is a tiny subsection, this militant left, mostly the rainbow militant left, who have demanded equality forever, and now they want to be superior and shut down other people who are opposed to them or who have a different point of view. It is a very dangerous precedent, and GoFundMe have demonstrated how hypocritical they are, as have much of the media, by not picking on Sarah Hanson-Young for crowdfunding her legal fees or mosques for crowdfunding their things. You could go on and on and on. The hypocrisy here is breathtaking.
Because this is the thing, Richo, again, have we talked about it too much? Yes. But this thing gives us a new thing to talk about all the time, because we have to talk about the reaction here. We have to talk about the idea that not only are you catapulted out of the castle, but you have to go all the way to the end of the earth, and even then they want you to fall off the end of it.
Yeah, look, I think it's all getting a bit rich. I don't like what Folau had to say, but I must say, if you don't believe in hell, and I don't, why would you get so upset about it? It just sort of goes in one ear and out the other with me. I mean, but, you know, I respect his right to have those beliefs. I just don't share them. But I don't get upset about people of faith, you know, talking about their faith. And we all have to understand that, you know, that freedom of religion is alive and well in Australia, and you can't allow it to be wounded in any way, shape or form. I mean, this is a pretty important right, and as far as I'm concerned, good luck to him.
Now, of course, Rowan, you know how this works, because I just used the metaphor of going to the end of the earth and then falling off the end of it. Somehow I'm officially a flat earther. I think we all know I was speaking as a metaphor here. Also, I can tell the difference between what was originally written and the principle that's at play here. This is my point, where I don't mind that the consequence of free speech is that someone can come back and attack you. I also don't mind necessarily if, due to the nature of your contract you have with your employer, you might lose your job. But the idea that you are unemployable, you know, and sort of unable to invoke this person's name ever again as if they were a mass murderer, we've got problems here.
Yeah, and you're right, Paul, you've identified the problem. It's a kind of medieval lynch mob, which is what a lot of social media we know is. But when corporations start playing in this field, it gets very, very dangerous. What's really interesting about this is there clearly is a hunger for free speech and freedom of religious expression in Australia, a kind of common sense, natural feeling. And the more this story plays out, it kind of runs in all sorts of different directions, which is quite fascinating, because people are now arguing, well, first it was, well, should a company be allowed to put in a contract, something that overrides your free speech? Now it's, this new Googleocracy, these new big tech digital companies that suddenly decide, oh, we don't like them, so we're going to pull the plug on them. That opens up a whole new discussion about free speech and these media platforms that can silence just ordinary everyday Australians. I'm not saying Israel Folau is necessarily an ordinary everyday Australian, but the fact that a company like GoFundMe can just decide on a whim, no, we don't like that, and pull the plug, I think it's fascinating, because it really is focusing on why free speech is so important. And I don't think we can discuss free speech enough until it literally is free, which it isn't at the moment in this country.
Look, provided there's no incitement to violence.
Absolutely.
I don't care what people say.
Absolutely.
Good luck to you.
I agree totally with Richo.
Well, in the same way that a radical Islamic person will say that I'm an infidel because I don't believe them. Well, so what? I don't believe them. They can declare me to be whatever they want, but there are certain crazy parts of that religion who believe that punishment should be death that goes on here. Of course, you can't possibly say any of that. Look, Pauline, I know we've talked too much about it, but I want to give you the chance here to talk about the principle versus the person, or is the whole point that it's indivisible what the principle and the person is here?
We've allowed our democracy and our freedom of speech to be taken over by those with their thoughts and their opinions to suppress us. What he has said doesn't worry me whatsoever, because it doesn't affect me. And he has spoken in his community, in his church, and they're his thoughts. They've actually made that very public, and they've actually taken it to impact on the NRL and also the sponsors of it. And I think it's totally wrong. So they're telling us where and how we should speak and what we should say, our thoughts and all the rest of it. I support Israel, I really do, over this, because whether it's GoFundMe, which has shut him down, I think that's wrong in itself as well, that he is actually standing up to him, and good on him, because I've had to stand up to them over the years because I was called a racist, and they tried to shut me down. A precedent is going to be set here. I hope he takes them on, and I hope that he does prove to be right in what he's saying, that he has a right to have his own thoughts and say what he wants to say. We are grown up enough to actually decipher it for ourselves, not have other people telling us how we should react to this. So it's a tough battle. I support him fully, and I hope he keeps going. And if you want to fund him, I hope he puts up a trust through a lawyer's office, or I'm quite willing to help in any way that I possibly can, because it's just not about him. And forget about him selling his property or houses. This is going to set a precedent for all Australians. So think about that, and you better get behind him and support him, because they're trying to shut us down as much as they possibly can.
All right, now I'm not going to get to everyone on everything tonight, because all of you have got the ability to be a sole guest for an hour here, so I'm going to try and bounce around a little bit here before I take a break. Richo, someone is playing some funny buggers here in Queensland. Now, I know that there's some sort of LNP types who are pretending that at any day soon there's going to be either a move or a quiet shove on Anastasia Palaszczuk out the door as Premier, and even Jackie Trad not making her Premier but pushing her out as well. And that probably is what's led to this in the Australian today, which is a strange story suggesting that, now I'd never heard she was a chance of doing this, so it's weird that the first time we hear about this is a denial. But anyway, Palaszczuk will not move to London. Queensland Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk insists she will lead them to the next election, which is mid-next year, I think, ruling out a shift to London to become the government's European Trade Commissioner. I'll ask you a straight question. Will Palaszczuk be the leader of the Labor Party in Queensland at the 2020 state election?
Yes.
Fair enough. Where's this coming from?
Oh, look, who knows? If you talk to people in the party in Queensland, a lot of people are just amazed because there's no move against Palaszczuk. She's there for as long as she wants to be, and I look at these things, and you make phone calls, you try and find out what's causing the smoke, and I can't find it. There's no fire. There's not even a little crackle anywhere. There's nothing happening here. Nothing to see.
Well, because it's this thing where, look, I mean, you know, in terms of Palaszczuk, there's plenty of decisions that we can fight about, and no doubt Paul and I have something to say in a second. But as a political figure, this is a person who brought them back from when they had a party room in a Tarago to government. She was then able to increase their numbers to be able to get them to a majority. You would think that that holds her in for the next 4 years, or next couple of years, but we'll see what happens. Pauline, how do you feel about Palaszczuk, and do you want her to be the leader that you presumably would run some candidates against at the next election?
Definitely will be running candidates in every seat in the next state election, which will be October next year, 2020. And the whole fact is, Palaszczuk is on the nose up here because she was against Adani. That gave jobs to central Queensland. People in Queensland needed those jobs and the money coming in from that. Now, she changed her mind at the drop of a hat after the election because she saw the impact that the federal election had on the state. And I just hope that Jackie Trad doesn't take over the leadership, because she's actually worse. But then who are you going to go with in the Labor Party? And Richo, you couldn't even pick the federal election. So you're suggesting that Palaszczuk is there for the long run. You know, I don't take your word with it, because you couldn't pick the federal election. And,
no, I got one wrong in 50
she's
years.
On the nose. Labour
I
Party
apologise,
are on
Pauline.
the nose here in
Huge error.
Queensland. So
God
I
help
don't
us.
think that they're actually going to win the next election. I believe they'll go out.
Yeah, well, it's good that you're always Robinson Crusoe on these things. Palaszczuk will win the next election and win it comfortably. Anastasia Palaszczuk is quite a remarkable woman. She's a graduate of the London School of Economics. She's no dill, and she'll do well. There'll be no move against her. I think the person being suggested was Cameron Dick was about to run against her. That won't happen. I think people just get carried away with these things. When there's nothing happening, journalists like to fiddle around and see if they can make something happen. Nothing here.
All right, let's take a quick break, because I want to get to a few things, including give Richo the chance to respond to what I had to say about the money man for the Labor Party now with Jim Chalmers. And you'd be pleased to know, in 4 days, he was able to make the same distance that Pauline's been making in the past couple of days in the far north. But anyway, after that, I want to talk to Corey about Australian Conservatives, and also, is he about to rejoin the Liberal Party? Does he stay put? Does he become an independent? What technically happens in the next little while? And we have to talk about Clover Moore. We have to talk about how a local council has decided it is a climate emergency. Something must be done, and must be done now, after we start a electronic-powered train line up the middle of the street. Quick break. Don't go anywhere. Thank you so much for watching. Welcome back to beautiful Brisbane. Head home tomorrow. In the meantime, I will kiss the ground as long as I am here in beautiful Queensland. Now, right now, if you're in Melbourne, you know that it's pretty cold. Feels like 5 degrees right now. Well, I can tell you at the Sky News Centre in the car park there, it's about 12 degrees, and that's where Richo and Rowan are. If we go across to Adelaide, that's 9 degrees, but feels like 8 degrees, and that's where Corey Bernardi is right now. And then the far tippy top of Australia right now is where Pauline Hanson is currently sitting at a place that is 23 degrees right now. I think you win.
Yes, I do. Short sleeves.
Yeah, I think Pauline wins. All right, now, Corey, I want to ask you about Australian Conservatives. Now, obviously, it was pretty clear. I think it was pretty clear, not just after the election results, but that show straight after them, when we had the conversation with Scott Morrison, and you were very clear that you were pleased about so much of what he had taken on board from that particular win. It seemed fairly obvious that there was part of you that felt job done here, if not the job you wanted done, a reverse job on the Liberal Party getting changed. We know through the week that the party gets wrapped up. Next couple of days, financially, it's done. But I want to talk about the future. Straight out, have you had conversations about rejoining the Liberal Party? That's the first bit.
Paul, the last 4 weeks have been about wrapping up the party and coming to that decision. It's been a tough decision, and over the weekend I've had plenty of time to think about what future I'm going to have. And, you know, the conclusion I came to is this. I've had a few mates that have contacted me and said, you know, I should go back to the party and so on, but I actually don't think it's particularly fair for me to make that request. I left the party to do something. I'm a big boy. I can wear the consequence of the decision. I don't shy away from the fact that I'm going to support this government for as long as I'm in the parliament and do what I can to make them as strong and as healthy as I can. But honestly, it would just open a whole bunch of new bad blood, I suspect, with a bunch of people. And it's just, I think that the principle is right not to seek to rejoin them.
So in those representations, were they ever serious, or was it something that this was kind of always the way it was going to be, which is that you'll see out the term or as much of it as you want to under the banner of Australian Conservatives? Is that what you'll sit in as the parliament, or do you sit as an independent now?
I think without a party registered, I think I'd probably be an independent. I'll take some advice on that. But look, I've still got mates in the Liberal Party. You know, they know where my heart is, and a lot of them have been very encouraging. And there were some positive comments, some less than positive ones too, but some positive comments that came from higher up the field in the public domain last week. But I don't want to play ducks and drakes with people. I'm just trying to level a very difficult circumstance, difficult situation, trying to be as candid as I can. You know, for however long I'm in that parliament, and, you know, whether it be 1 year or more or less, I don't know, I'll do everything I can to make their government a success.
Pauline, you don't want a senator from South Australia? There's a bloke who's on offer here.
No, not on offer.
No, I'm quite happy the way we are, thank you, Paul. Corey's made that decision, and he can still represent the Australian Conservatives as a parliamentary leader, so he can register the party as a parliamentary leader without the 500 members. So it's his choice whether he wants to still use the name. It's not easy running a political party, I can assure you. And these people start up their parties. It's hard to contend against the major political parties. It's been extremely hard for myself. And Corey's had a go at it, and it's shown that Corey didn't make a success of it, and in the last election. But you know, I'm going to keep going and see what we can do to actually bring accountability and keep the major political parties on their toes. And Corey says he's going to back the Liberals up all the way. Well, sometimes they don't always get it right. This is where you need the crossbench. People with individual thinking can actually pull them up where they've got it wrong, and not just go along and tick the box because you know, that's where your leanings were. I originally joined the Liberal Party, but I was told to shut up, you know nothing, you know, don't say anything. Well, that's not me, and I believe that we are in a position, I'll still say that to you, Corey, we are in a position that we need to speak up if they haven't got it right and try to get it right for the Australian people.
Corey?
Well, Pauline, I regret, Pauline, that a lot of the things that you speak up about I disagree with, and you know, it's very hard to argue. I believe that the government shouldn't be able to have their tax cuts because you want to cling to the notion of a discredited plan from 1938 to pump water uphill and into central Australia where it will evaporate. I mean, that's the reality of what it is. I'm terribly sorry, but that's the truth of it. I want to be rational.
South Australian, you want to take all the water down there to pour out into the ocean, and you don't give a damn about the Murray-Darling, the communities, the growers, all the rest of it. That tells me what you've just said then. Tells me you don't know what you're talking about with the Bradfield scheme, Corey. That tells me you have no idea what you're talking about. No wonder people didn't vote for you.
This is part of the problem, Pauline. You get all emotional about things, and unfortunately the facts escape you. Now, I'm not going to pick on you. They didn't vote for me. That's fine, because I don't believe in the conspiracy theories. I didn't read the Port Arthur Blue Book. I didn't try and upset our gun laws. I mean, go for it. Go as hard as you. We did badly in the election, but at least my integrity is intact.
Oh, so is mine, Corey, no worries. And I actually got a senator up in Queensland.
Yeah, who's also got a reputation for telling the truth. Who's got a reputation for telling the truth.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm sure Richo would love this to be the rest of the hour.
Yeah, I'm enjoying myself.
You've got a former senator... Yeah, you got a former senator sitting there. He's pretty good on TV. Can we get a fourth seat for the outsiders if Corey ever needs to do the TV thing?
Absolutely. But listen, Paul, I think I've worked it. I think Corey is on slightly thin ice talking about pushing water uphill, because that is, of course, Liberal Party policy in Snowy 2.0 to push water uphill for no purpose whatsoever. But I do have a plan which solves everything, Paul. Corey joins One Nation, as you said. He then resigns. He he becomes the South Australian Senator. He then resigns and gets replaced by Jennifer Game, who's one of the best people One Nation have got. She should have been elected in South Australia. She's an outstanding candidate, and then everybody wins.
Thank you.
And then Corey can join
Rowan,
outsiders, and we'll all be happy ever after.
That's not the way it works, mate. The Liberal Party will actually choose my replacement when I go.
Be more benefit on the floor of Parliament. Not if you can come across the One Nation for that.
All right, let's agree. Best 10 minutes of TV we've had in some time. Richo, I want to talk about Jim Chalmers and what he had to say yesterday. Roll of tape. Here is the Shadow Treasurer.
Your leader, Anthony Albanese, on Friday said he didn't reckon somebody earning $200,000 was in the top end of town. Do you agree with him?
Yeah, I agree with the 2 points that Anthony has been making about this. First of all, we accept that some of the language that we used in the last term, and I used in the last term, didn't strike the right chord in the Australian community. We do acknowledge that. And the second point that Anthony is making there is that if you're on a good wicket in this country, we say good on you. That is a good thing.
All right, Richo, what do you have to say about what he's had to say? And if you want to give it to me, give it to me.
No, look, I think that Chalmers has done the right thing. Paul, the problem that you've got here is that if Chalmers doesn't admit there's something wrong, you bag him. Then if he admits there's something wrong, you bag him. So he can't win with you. He's got absolute Buckleys of getting anywhere with Paul Murray. So I don't look to you to be much of a help in this. But I think Chalmers is making a good point. I want Labor to acknowledge that people on 200 grand a year are nobody's enemy. People on 200 grand a year are making things happening. And I'm delighted to hear Labor start to say that sort of thing. Because class wars will get Labor nowhere. They never win them. Because if you don't have a quid, you want to have a quid, you aspire. And so Labor's bound to lose class wars. And, Bowen embarked upon them, and they were always bound to end in tears, and they did. I'm glad to see that Chalmers is reconstructing that.
But what's interesting to note is that, look, it is good that he goes out and says we've learnt our lesson, but then Shadow Cabinet today holds a meeting and basically still leaves open the idea of if, but, maybe. If the government won't split the tax cuts, then they may eventually end up supporting them. But they'd really like the people earning over $180,000 not to get that tax cut. So they're sort of saying they've learnt their lesson, but they haven't really shown they've learnt their lesson. Is that a reasonable observation?
Yes. I don't think that what they did today is entirely consistent with the image they're trying to portray. And so I reckon they've just got to wake up to themselves on this. The thing is, my grand old party doesn't always get it right, and they're not right on this. They're mucking around on tax. All I know is I've never met a taxpayer that wanted to pay more. I only ever met a taxpayer who wanted to pay less.
Correct. See, Richo, this is why we love you, brother. See, we always end up agreeing, mate. We always end up on the same page. Rowan, what do you think about what does seem to be the gulf between the message they want everyone to see, to say we've learnt the lesson, but then at a meeting today of Shadow Cabinet, they confirm they haven't learnt it yet?
Yeah, well, you see, Richo's missed his vocation. Richo should be a tradie with a kind of papering over the cracks. The Labor Party are falling apart faster than a Sydney tower block at the moment, and Richo's done a good job of kind of saying, oh, no, it's all OK, it's all OK. It's not OK. This bloke Chalmers is an absolute joke. I mean, he's been in, as you pointed out rightly in your editorial, he's been in some of the key portfolios, and he would have been a key player in the Labor government had Richo been right, which I would like to point out he was wrong. Had he been right...
Gee, you don't do
Labor,
that much.
Well, I'd have to keep reminding you because you kept reminding me that I was going to be wrong. So this bloke Chalmers is in it up to his teeth in all the mistakes that Labor made, and he couldn't even say, I got it wrong. He said, oh, we were a bit tone deaf, or we didn't strike a chord. They used all this spin jargon, Paul, rather than saying, I was wrong. I got it right, and I'm now going to change my tune because I learnt the lesson of the election. Labor can't bring themselves to say it. Richo does a fine old job of papering over the cracks, but the Labor Party, they chose the wrong bloke with Albanese, as Richo knows. Albanese is a disaster. We're seeing that every day. Can't make a decision.
That's nonsense. I do not know that at all.
Absolute farce.
He is the guy I would have,
Labor
I would have voted
Labor
for.
had a chance to get it right, but they got it.
Cannot cop that. Albo is my mate, and I think Albo is going to be a great leader for us, and Albo will win the next election. So remain calm, but don't accuse me of in any way backing off Albo, because I never have, not for a second.
Fair enough.
No, your columns are pretty consistent, as are your public utterances. Corey and then Pauline, and we're going to move on.
I reckon Richo's just made his second bad election call in 50 years.
Oh,
I think so.
Don't. All right, Pauline, this bloke says that he's starting to understand Queensland. He's done a little trip over 4 days. He's starting to deliver the message back to the boss, but when the boss has a chance to talk about those tax cuts, they're not backing them.
All right. Anthony Albanese gave me a call today, and I know Anthony because I did a trip overseas with him, parliamentary, so I got to know Albo. He did ring me today with regards to the tax cuts and asked me where I stood with this and what they were thinking about doing. I'm going to have further talks with him next week because I want to see what the impact it is going to be on the budget by passing first and second stage. When I spoke to Cormann last week, he said dead set, he's not negotiating, we are not changing at all, we are going to go with the first, second and third package. Has Labor got it? Look, I don't think so. They want to pass it, and I understand that people need the personal tax cuts passed. They need relief because the escalating costs of living costs. But when he talks about infrastructure projects, we do need roads, but we need to put in infrastructure that is going to create jobs and bring down the cost of electricity. And we need water projects like the Bradfield scheme to give the water to drought-affected farmers and run it down to the Murray-Darling that's affecting communities as well. So these are long-term projects that will see us into the future, not short-term sugar hits that any government can change in the tax cuts at the next election. So this is where my head's at. I want to know what it's going to cost the economy and the impact it's going to have. So I'm not making decisions going with either Liberal or Labor. I'm going to look at the impact, and I'll have further talks with Albanese next week. But I appreciate him giving me the phone call and talking to me personally about it today.
All right, well, there's been a bit of news, lots of news tonight. Corey Bernardi's not going back to the Libs and Albo's on the phone to Pauline. Corey, one more. I've desperately got to take a break, mate.
Yeah, just a question. Why don't Labor pass all 3 tranches of the tax cuts and then go to the next election saying they're going to repeal the last one? That'd clear it all up.
Well,
good call.
Well, correct. Well, Richo, come on, you're the Albo whisperer.
I don't know anyone who's ever won an election saying, I'm going to take some money out of your pocket. So, no,
there you go.
I wouldn't be urging Albo to do that in any way, shape or form. Thanks for the advice, Corey, but no.
It's pretty simple, right? Shorten didn't listen on 50-50 renewables, didn't listen on tax, and look what happened. Listen to Richo, OK? I'm pretty sure he does, though. Quick break, back with more. Plenty to talk about, including a public holiday just for public servants in Western Australia. No, it's not 1940 and we're celebrating May Day. It's 2019 and we're talking about Australia. Thank you very much for watching, and a massive thank you to my mate Gary Hardgrave, who did a great job hosting the show last night. He missed out Origin, which I know is a horrible thing to make a Queenslander do. I owe him one, and I owe him one big. You can cash in that favour anytime you want, mate. Always get in touch, and thank you very much. We'll see him again, of course, later in the week here on Paul Murray Live, and you'll see him on Friday here in this very studio, live from Brisbane. Do lots of shows from Queensland, which we very much like. Now, Graham Richardson is, of course, Labor legend, big part of what we do here at Sky News. He just had a brilliant idea, which is that we should podcast the off-air chat, particularly the past 5 minutes. You reckon that should go public at some point in time, Richo? People love it.
They'd like it. Yeah, it was pretty good.
It was very good.
It was certainly lively. Let's just say that. It was definitely lively. It'll keep them awake.
All right. Let's keep the conversation going with Rowan Dean, with Pauline Hanson and with Corey Bernardi as well. Now, the Prime Minister today said that he wants to start cutting some green tape to make sure that some of the environmental regulations that are not about saying it's OK to back a ute up and start pouring toxic ooze into waterways, but whether some things are too onerous now, particularly some of the stuff that we've seen held up around the Adani mine as an example. This is what he said today in Perth, which is business leaders want the states to cooperate with the Morrison government's review of red tape, saying the planning and approvals process from everything from liquor licensing to mega mines needs to be overhauled as a top priority. Now, Rowan, what I love about this is that when this even the discussion about cutting taxes, red tape, green tape, and pushing back about some issues on IR with union control, The Guardian, in between writing conspiracy theories about yours truly or this channel, or begging for donations, they describe it as Trumpian.
Well, that's exactly right. And there's only one piece of green tape. I can cut it with a pair of scissors tomorrow. It's called the Paris Agreement. We should get out of the Paris Agreement immediately. That is the big green tape across this country, which is destroying our economy, our prosperity, our future. We've got this idiot Clover Moore declaring her climate emergency, all based on the Paris Agreement, Paul. We have to pull out of this thing immediately. They're sitting, we are sending people to Bonn at the moment who are sitting there being quizzed on our gender policies on climate change, on our Indigenous policies on climate change. Are we listening to the trans community on climate change? It's insanity. It's cuckoo land stuff. We've got to get out of it. Corey and Pauline, make this government pull out of this madness. You both owe it to the Australian people.
Totally agree, Rowan. Totally agree.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm with you. There's no question there. The Paris Agreement is crazy, and I think when I came back from overseas and Trump had agreed to review it, I said it was mad for Julie Bishop and Malcolm Turnbull to ratify it at the time.
Right.
But they went off and ratified it anyway.
That, now, Richo, what about this idea? I mean, obviously, after an election, and an election that had so many angles in it that this one particularly did, the government is always in the position to drive home an agenda pretty hard for the first couple of months. What were you reading into or not reading into or seeing tea leaves or hearing directly from the PM when he was in Perth today?
Well, I don't think you should read too much. He's going to push ahead with tax cuts, and he has more than a mandate to do that. No one can really argue. I mean, I think when you're a newly elected government, you can pretty well claim a mandate to do much as you like, because, yeah, a lot of policies, and you can say I got elected, and this policy, it might have been on page 34, and it might have been down the bottom of that page, and it might have been point I in point 37, but I have it, and so I'm going to do it. I mean, there's just any number of policies that he can pursue now. I don't think people in the electorate worry about what's a mandate and what's not. They just want governments to do things to make their lives better. And I think, ScoMo's a pretty smart guy. He's shown us that he's no deal, that he gets where ordinary Aussies are. I mean, he's just an ordinary Aussie himself, and I think it's been a great advantage to him.
No, agree completely. I'm sorry I'm a little over time here. I don't know if I can say goodbye to everyone watching us on WIN, but thank you very much for watching wherever you happen to be. We'll see you again tomorrow night. Bill and Boz getting ready for you in a moment or two's time. Let's continue the conversation now here with, well, can we talk about in Western Australia, right? So the McGowan government is trying to deal with a pretty full-on public service union, and they want a big pay rise. They want a couple of $1,000s for all the workers. They're not going to pay that, probably going to be more like $1,000. So what's the trade-off? An extra public holiday just for public servants in Western Australia. Have a look at this, which is more than 30,000 public servants get that public holiday as part of the new sweetener from the state government to say, we're not going to give you money, but we'll give you an extra day off. Rowan, how the hell does this work where you get a public holiday if you work for the public service where already you get more super than anyone else and you get more pay rises than anyone else?
Well, this is Labor through and through. This is all that the Labor Party are about these days, the modern Labor Party, trying to bribe people on one end, the people who work for them, by giving more and more jobs. Queensland do the same thing. Labor governments create jobs and then tax the poor people or the elderly and others in order to pay for these jobs so that these people will vote for them. It's an absolute rort. It's a Ponzi scheme. So this stupid public holiday they're offering, that comes directly out of the pockets of people who've worked hard all their lives, small businesses and others, to pay for this. And wait for it, Paul, you read down through that article, they're even offering 5 ceremonial days to Indigenous public servants. 5 ceremonial paid days coming out of the pocket of taxpayers. What an absolute joke. This is Labor governments through and through. This is why people should not be voting for them.
Richo,
well, I'd have to concede, by the way,
you're trying to find...
Sorry, I'm just going to say I have to concede that 5 Indigenous days seems to me to be a tad off. I wouldn't be supporting that either. It's easy to say you won't vote for Labor. McGowan is wildly popular. The people of Western Australia I think that, you know, what Rowan does so often these days is he passes a vote of no confidence in the people.
I think I got the people right, Richo. I think you're on very, very dangerous territory here, Richo.
No, look,
let's not go down that path. I think I give full credit to the people that they recognise that Labor and Bill Shorten would be a disaster. The people made that choice, Richo.
Yeah, they did. I think, you know, if we're going to go back over that for the 800th time,
we'll be going over 18,000 times, Richo.
Bill Shorten was obviously not the one to lead us. And he never, I think, struck the right chord with Australian people, and they reacted accordingly. And Labor were mugs to keep him there that long.
And so you've got Mark McGowan bribing people to keep himself in power.
It's not bribing people to keep them in power. You have negotiations over pay increases. They happen all the time. I mean, except I haven't had a pay increase in 7 years at Sky, but that's a different matter.
That's because of private enterprise, Richo. That's how it works. We're too busy paying for all your Labor mates to get there.
I know the feeling, Richo. I know the feeling. I know the feeling. Pauline, what do you think about a state government saying you can get an extra public holiday if you're a public servant?
I think it stinks, absolutely stinks. And you know what I hear from the public all the time? They're fed up with pay rises that are given to politicians, the superannuation that we get compared to every other Australian. Public servants should be on the same superannuation as every other Australian, no different. And these public holidays, I think it stinks. And that is the problem. And it does seem to be always Labor that introduces this all the time. They're supposed to be for the worker. No, they're lining their own bloody pockets. Let's treat everyone equally in Australia. And, you know, general public, everyone gets it. If not, no one gets it. And I'm sick of the governments looking after their own. The bureaucrats, they're on these high wages. A lot of them are on $600,000 to $800,000 a year. This is coming out of the ratepayers and the taxpayers of this nation. Not the ratepayers, but the taxpayers, state or federal. And I think it's just completely, the people have had a gutful of it, and I hope they vote accordingly and throw these people out to keep, you know, giving these public holidays and unwarranted holidays. We have got so many holidays in this country, and we're giving more and more leave, and someone's got to pay for it, and it comes down to the everyday Australian out there who are struggling to make ends meet.
Well said. Hear, hear.
Corey, baby, what about some of those... that was very informal of me, but anyway. What about...
Corey, baby.
Richo, baby, Pauline, baby, Rowan, baby, anyway. I've got the Queensland vibe here. I've got the Queensland vibe. I'm loving every second of it. All right. I'm sure nobody will have fun with that at Channel 2 in the next few days. Corey, what do you think about Western Australia public servants getting their own public holiday? And as Rowan said too, when you read a little further down, special cultural leave.
Look, it's wrong, and I don't think anyone can defend it, but you can understand why people are attracted to go to work in the public service. There's less accountability. They have more leave, access to leave. Their pay rises are, you know, virtually guaranteed, as is their job security. And it's little wonder, I think, the highest household wealth and the highest per capita income anywhere in the country is in Canberra. It's because it's a home of public servants. So it's creeping. It is a goal, I think, of Labor governments to increase the public service, because then people are dependent on the government of the day, and it just robs us of a productive economy.
I think when Cameron sacked 13,000 public servants, the idea that they've got guaranteed longevity of employment, I think, looked a bit sick. I think governments are less inclined to accept that these days, even Labor governments.
Yeah, now, I mentioned this a couple of times, and we have throughout the show, which is that the Sydney Lord Mayor has declared a climate emergency. Of course, it's all nonsense. At the very same time as, literally, she used all of that, you know, naturally occurring concrete to lay that naturally occurring steel for that naturally occurring light rail, which will be powered by electricity. OK, fine, fair enough, but let's see. I mean, talk about virtue signalling. This is sort of A-grade version of, isn't it, Rowan?
Unfortunately, I wish it were just virtue signalling, but it's not. It's incredibly dangerous. These things always have a knock-on impact, because it then allows this bit of local council legislation to come in order to combat the climate emergency. The people, as Pauline was saying, who suffer will be the ratepayers. They'll be hit with this or that tax or this red tape or green tape. It's always the small business person, the person working hard, who gets hit by this sort of madness, and it is madness. There is nothing whatsoever that the Lord Mayor of of Sydney can do. She is not some god, some wizard who can change the temperature of this planet. It's not a skill she has.
I concur.
Thank you.
What about this stuff, Richo, where, again, in the Oz today, Australian officials attending climate change talks in Germany are being grilled on how the country is tackling global warming by addressing gender and Indigenous issues. Kind of makes it hard for those who argue about the wide-sweeping, urgent need for reform and action here, that it's actually about anything but using climate change as the Trojan horse to get all the other stuff lefties want.
Yeah, look, I know this is a word you shouldn't use on television, but I think conferences like that are dominated by wankers. And
100%.
And there's not much you can do about that, you know.
Well, you cannot pay, you cannot participate. That's what
they're just dominated by people you wouldn't feed.
Precisely. So we should be sending people there.
Every single one of them, and Corey, you remember this from the UN time, right? They all get on a plane and turn left. They never turn right, and they always fly a plane, you see. Interestingly, by the way, when Parliament sits next week, I'll be pleased to know whether Zali Steggall will be walking to Canberra, will be cycling to Canberra, or do you think she'll be in the Chairman's Club there at Qantas?
She'll be elbowing them out of the way in the Chairman's Club. That's what she'll be doing.
We all know that
game. Let's go back to the UN, mate, for a moment. They are just extraordinary. It is all about snouts in the trough over there and about how many junkets they can get on. And, you know, interestingly, they have things like the health conference where they won't allow journalists to attend. And I asked to attend one, I wasn't allowed to go, even though I was a delegate to the UN. It's really quite an odd place.
Pauline, what do you think of the idea that gender and Indigenous issues are apparently relevant to making sure that the global temperature doesn't increase?
I'm sick of hearing about all this garbage, I really am. You know what I'm happy about is that Malcolm Roberts has got elected to the floor of Parliament again. He is the one person who knows what he's talking about, and as he says all the time, the scientists are coming up with these facts, but they don't have peer review of their comments, and so they are picking this up and they're using what the scientists are saying. These are people that probably wouldn't have a job now in high-paid jobs. It's all about what, at the end of the day, the money that it makes for big business and creating employment based on this climate change BS that they're feeding to all of us, which is impacting on our lives. So, you know, I'm pleased to say that Malcolm Roberts will be there. No one can actually match him with his knowledge and information that he's going to put on that floor of Parliament. Hopefully we'll get some common sense, but they'll shut him down like they did. They tried to last time, and the media, the left-leanings.
Yeah.
Oh, they're obsessed with it. You watch how they'll...
Murdoch media, they're just so left-wing. Oh, God, they're left-wing. No, that Rupert, he's a dead-set comp, you know. I mean, it's a real problem. Fair dinkum.
We are an island of common sense in a sea of crazy. You know that. You know that. All right, last one here. Corey, you get to say this and then we're going to finish up here. Apparently people are so stupid in Adelaide that they don't look up from their phones, and now rather than telling people to look up from their phones, the Adelaide City Council and the SA State Government is now thinking about putting red and green lights in the ground to tell people whether they can walk across a street or not. Now, I love the people of Adelaide. I love that city. I love going there every year for the V8s. But for goodness sake, how can the joint be that stupid?
Well, I think you've probably explained my election result in Adelaide, haven't you? Look, it beggars belief that this sort of stuff goes on, and, you know, where does personal responsibility kick in and excuses for stupidity kick out?
It's that thing, for goodness sake, just look up, people. I get it. Pauline, enjoy the far north. How long will you be there for?
Till Wednesday, Paul, flying out of here on Wednesday. So I'm up here to try and get the boardwalk built for the community here, for the tourists, and right to the tip. So anyway, that's what I'm here for, and I've been pushing it with the government last sitting of Parliament, so I'm going to continue with it, so to try and get the boardwalk built.
Admirable.
Now, incidentally, you and Albo, any chance of a lunch anytime soon, or is it just all phone calls?
No, I'm sure we'll catch up. We were supposed to catch up for dinner after we came back from our trip over to India. So, yes, I'm going to sit down and have lunch with, or a dinner with Albo. Of course I will. He's a lovely guy.
Good stuff. He is a lovely bloke. It's a big step forward from Shorten. Lesson could have been learned about 3 years ago, but there you go. Thank you very much, Pauline. Corey, again, confirming for us tonight, will not be rejoining the Liberal Party. Instead, back into Parliament, and we'll talk to him when he's back in Canberra next week. Thank you, mate. All the best in Adelaide. Just look up when you're using your phone. We'll see Rowan Dean with the Spectator magazine. Of course, you're somewhat upset that Boris Johnson is steaming his way to becoming Prime Minister of the UK, but we'll find a way to talk about it out on The Outsiders on Sunday. And, Richard, we'll see you again across Sky News across the week and back here next Monday. Good on you, great man.
Great pleasure to be here.
See?
Even sitting
God
next to
love you,
Rowan,
Richard.
I love that too.
All right, that's where we'll leave tonight's debate. Let's turn our attention to sport. We'll talk about Origin. We'll talk about so much with two blokes who just had the experience in Perth. And I tell you what, WA, you absolutely nailed Origin last night. And I know it's going to be a couple of years before you get it again, but I think I'd take it over going anywhere but Sydney and Brisbane. If it's going to go somewhere, can it please keep going back to Perth? What an amazing night. Just the showbiz around the game, and the game, of course, was magnificent. But I shouldn't say that too loudly in the Courier Mail office. Quick break, back with more.